When you think of sports cars, what materials come to mind? Steel, aluminum, maybe even carbon fiber if you're thinking high performance. But wood, that's not even on the list, unless you're building a boat or furniture. But believe it or not, one car shattered every expectation, every preconception, and every automotive standard by using exactly that: wood. And not as a trim, not for aesthetic flair, but as the actual chassis and body structure. It wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a concept car. It was real, it moved, it performed, and it proved the world wrong. This is the story of the Marcos GT, a wooden sports car born out of British ingenuity, engineering rebellion, and good old-fashioned determination. At a time when performance meant heavy metal and power meant displacement, this car showed up quietly, lightweight, graceful, yet impossibly strong. And even though the industry laughed at it, mocked it, and said it couldn't be done, the Marcos GT didn't just survive, it raced, competed, and left its doubters choking in its wooden dust. Let's rewind to the early 1960s. The British sports car scene was booming. You had legends like Lotus, TVR, MG, and Triumph battling it out for lightweight supremacy. The formula was simple: strip weight, increase power-to-weight ratio, and win races. But Jem Marsh and Frank Costin, the founders of Marcos Cars, wanted to do something completely different. Frank Costin was no stranger to wild ideas. He had worked as an aerodynamicist for de Havilland and had even designed for Lotus. His obsession was simple: make cars as light and aerodynamic as possible. But instead of turning to aluminum or fiberglass like everyone else, Costin went back to nature. He believed wood could do what metal couldn't: offer flexibility, rigidity, and most of all, weight savings. So in 1964, Marcos introduced the GT with a fully laminated marine plywood chassis. Yes, that's right, marine plywood. The same stuff used to build boats was now being used to build a road-legal sports car. But this wasn't amateur hour. The wood was carefully layered and glued with high-tech resins, forming a monocoque structure that was light, incredibly strong, and surprisingly safe. The entire chassis weighed just around 150 pounds, lighter than most doors on an American muscle car. And because it didn't rust, it outlasted many of its metallic counterparts. Skeptics scoffed. But Marcos didn't care. They had a plan. And soon that plan was winning races. Under the hood, the Marcos GT wasn't shy. Depending on the variant and year, you could find everything from Ford Kent engines to Volvo B18 engines, and even Triumph straight sixes. But the magic wasn't just in the engine, it was in the synergy between power and weight. At under 1,600 pounds curb weight, the Marcos didn't need 400 horsepower to fly. With just 100 to 130 horses, it could keep up with much more powerful cars thanks to its nimble construction and aerodynamic shape. It was a scalpel in a world of sledgehammers. It carved corners like a predator and felt agile in a way that metal-bodied cars simply couldn't match. And when it came to racing, this wooden underdog didn't just show up, it showed out. The Marcos GT earned its stripes on the track with impressive performances across British and European racing circuits. Drivers praised it for its responsive handling and impeccable road feel. The wood, as it turns out, had natural damping properties that made the ride smoother while still delivering tight control in corners. It absorbed vibration and flexed in just the right ways. In many ways, it felt alive, something few metal cars could replicate. It was this unique feeling, combined with a head-turning design and respectable power, that gave the Marcos GT a cult following. And once people saw what it could do, they stopped laughing. Still with me? Good. Because now comes the twist that really puts this wooden legend into perspective. The Marcos GT didn't just race against other cars, it challenged automotive philosophy itself. In the 1960s and 70s, engineers were obsessed with rigid structures. The idea that you could use an organic material, something people associated with fragility, to build a sports car was borderline heresy. But the Marcos flipped that narrative on its head. It showed that strength could come from ingenuity, not just metal. That performance could come from harmony between material and design, not just brute force. And let's be honest, how many other wooden cars have not only survived but thrived? But don't think it was all smooth sailing. The The wood chassis, while brilliant, was incredibly labor-intensive to build. Skilled craftsmen had to hand-laminate each layer, shaping it precisely for rigidity and weight distribution. This meant production was slow, expensive, and difficult to scale. Eventually, Marcos had to move toward a steel frame construction in later models simply to survive as a company. But the legend of the original wooden GT was already etched into the pages of car history. It had done its job, it had proved the point, and it had inspired an entire generation of designers to think differently about materials and construction. Let's pause for a second and ask a question. Would you ever trust a car made of wood to protect you at high speed? Most people wouldn't, and that's exactly why the Marcos GT is so fascinating. It defied trust. It earned respect the hard way, by proving itself where it mattered, on the road and the track. And if that doesn't command respect, what does? And aesthetically, the Marcos GT was a beauty. Its long nose, low roofline, and curved hips gave it the silhouette of a true grand tour. It had that 60s charm you'd expect from a hand-built British sports car, but with an exotic twist. The interior was minimalist, focused on the driver. Gauges were simple, the cockpit tight and purposeful. You didn't get in a Marcos GT to relax. You got in to feel. Every corner, every vibration, every reverend, it was immersive. And in today's world of silent electric cars and digital steering, that raw mechanical connection feels more important than ever. By the late 1990s, Marcos eventually shuttered production for good after several revivals and iterations. But the legacy of the wooden GT still lives on, especially among collectors and enthusiasts who understand what it meant. Today, finding an original wood chassis Marcos GT is like discovering buried treasure. They're rare, they're delicate, but they're also respected. Restorers handle them like art. Historians talk about them in hushed, reverent tones. And those lucky enough to drive one? They'll tell you, there's simply nothing else like it. Let me hit you with this. How many cars do you know that were literally built like a violin, raced like a Porsche, and aged like fine wine? That's the story of the Marcos GT, a car that dared to be different, and in doing so, carved its own place in history, quite literally. It didn't follow trends. It didn't chase approval. It did what it did because it was bold enough to believe in something no one else dared to try. So what can we learn from the Marcos GT? Maybe it's this. Innovation doesn't always look the way we expect. It doesn't always wear carbon fiber, and it doesn't always roar with 700 horsepower. Sometimes innovation is quiet. It's layered. It's hidden beneath varnish and resin, waiting to show its strength when the pressure rises. The Marcos GT is more than just a car. It's a reminder that greatness doesn't come from following the blueprint. It comes from rewriting it. If you've made it this far, let's see where the real gearheads are. Would you drive a wooden car if you knew it was strong enough to handle track days? Or are you sticking to steel and aluminum? Drop your answer. I want to hear from the brave ones. In the end, the Marcos GT didn't just prove the critics wrong, it proved something deeper. That courage, creativity, and craftsmanship can triumph over convention. That wood, the very material we've used for thousands of years to build our homes, our tools, even our instruments, could also build a sports car. A fast one, a beautiful one that left its mark not by shouting, but by standing quietly in the corner until the moment it passed you on the straightaway and made you question everything you thought you knew about cars. That's the power of the Marcos GT, the rare wood sports car that turned doubters into believers and redefined what a performance car could be.